with meteorologist Mike Seidel. He's in Wilmington. Mike, I know the conditions have been absolutely horrific there. Update us on what it's like right now.
Oh, it's got a little bit better, only from the fact that the winds aren't gusting over 100 miles an hour, and the storm surge is beginning to back off. We're now about an hour and 20 minutes past high tide, but we've got another high tide coming up tonight around midnight, and the wind's still going to be blowing on shore. We've got east winds now. They were northeast. Yesterday, northwest, no issues. Northeast, now east, and that's piling the water up. And you can see here in Arley Road, we still have a lot of standing water. By the way, Hurricane Floyd, 19 years ago, I was right over there when the eye wall came over us, and the eye at 3:30 in the morning, the winds went calm, and the water did not get into the road. So the water, compared to Floyd, which was a Cat 3, a Cat 2 when it came in down in New Bern, was higher today than 19 years ago. So this water will back off, but it will come back as we get into midnight tonight. So a real rough situation here. I'm sure the beaches have been devastated as far as the erosion goes, and also the loss of sand and the big cuts in the beach. We've seen trees down. We've got some limbs down around the area, no big trees. This oak tree over here, we've got a big limb down over here. But driving in here this morning, we saw trees down here and there, not widespread tree damage. But as you know, hundreds of thousands of people are without power. Other impacts in the city of Wilmington. We're right out at the Intercoastal, the bridge across the Intercoastal that takes you to Wrightsville Beach. You can't get across there. Basically, about 4 or 5 people allowed to go over there, including the mayor. But let's go to New Hanover Park. We've got Brian Davidson on the phone. He's a storm tracker. And Brian, I know there are other issues besides surge across this area.
Yes, sir. This bridge, some people actually just a few minutes ago tried to cross it, and they went to the middle of the bridge to take photos, and they walked back over, and I don't know how they were on their feet, but the storm surge is coming in, and earlier we were seeing people across the bridge, and I was looking on Google Maps. The only way in and off that part of the property is through this bridge, so they are trapped right now.
And you've been driving around through the morning hours and now early afternoon. As far as tree damage and power lines down, how substantial is it in the areas you've traversed in Wilmington?
It is pretty bad. We've saw one structure that had completely, its roof was completely torn off. Its garage doors are completely blown in. The owners are trying to put the garage doors back on the wall, and they're boarding it up. That way, looters and stuff can't get into their building. But there's several trees down. People are trying to use their personal chainsaws to cut debris away from cars, and the roads are accessible.
Yeah, Brian, I've noticed a lot of folks driving around, and this is not a day to drive around town, especially in a tree-lined street or a road, because you don't want to be the next injury or fatality. Brian Davidson on the phone with us. Thank you very much, Brian, from New Hanover Park in the city of Wilmington. Again, we're out here at the Intercoastal, separating Wilmington from Wrightsville Beach. The storm surge came up very quickly. High tide was 11:46 a.m. this morning. We watched it come up and across the road down the street. A lot of seafood restaurants here, and here's the Bridge Tender, a great restaurant we ate in the other night. And look at the awning, the aluminum awning, and the skeleton has been ripped off and blown down that way. But the wind still whipping out here. We're still getting gusts pushing 55 to 60 miles an hour. So as a result, we're still going to have problems with trees coming down on power lines. And keep in mind, power crews, they're staged. Duke Energy is set to get the power back on. They've got crews that have come up from Florida Power, but they can't get up in bucket trucks with these winds. So it may be until, it may not be until later tomorrow, certainly Sunday, before they can really attack this power situation full steam ahead. Let's go now back to Mike Bettis. Mike, you're getting a piece of what we had this morning here with the eye wall down up here in Wilmington. I can hear the wind, hear the rain, and hear it in your voice.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be a rough afternoon, I think, for a lot of folks that are here in Myrtle Beach.
Wilmington, North Carolina, of course, an area that's bracing for significant impacts. Mike, we've seen a tremendous amount of rainfall today, and a lot of these rain bands could be quasi-stationary with the slow movement of that system today, Mike.
Yeah, and the wind is still howling out here. We're at the Intercoastal Bridge over to Wrightsville Beach. You can see the police contingent back there. They've been out there since Wednesday morning, not allowing anybody back over there. So the town itself is virtually a ghost town. The mayor yesterday thought there were maybe 5 or 6 residents that stay behind. It's going to be probably until late tomorrow or Sunday before they let the general public back over there. Maybe homeowners will get back over there. Power is a big problem with this kind of wind and trees down across the area. In North Carolina alone now, 604,000 customers without power, and that's customers. You know, you figure one house has about 3 people, so easily a million and a half folks do not have power right now. As the wind continues to gust here, 50 to 60 miles an hour. You mentioned the rainfall, Erica. Over at Wrightsville Beach, over 18 inches. Just checked Wilmington's rain gauge. They're inland. They've had almost 5 inches of rain, and if you haven't heard, they had their second highest wind gust on record earlier this morning with the eye wall at 105 miles an hour. That'll blow some trees down, and it has across the area. And there's been flooding too. We've got a flash flood warning for this area, and basically the coast from the Outer Banks all the way down in the northeastern South Carolina, Myrtle Beach area. For this area, the flash flood warning is in effect until about 6 this evening, and that will likely be extended because they're going to have these rain bands continue to roll in. The difference today, the wind, which was coming in from that direction yesterday off the land from the northwest, rotated around. It veered around as the eye went right over Wrightsville Beach. In fact, we had a bit of the edge of that, and the winds died down for a short time this morning. Once it went by, the winds went off to the northeast, and now they're coming in from the east, and they're still going to be gusty, and it's going to stay this way for a while because the hurricane basically is not moving, or it's not moving much, and it's still got a large and tight pressure, large pressure gradient, and that's what's creating the wind. So don't expect these winds to die down anytime soon. Our coverage around the clock continues through the weekend. Hurricane Florence now drifting towards South Carolina. Updated track forecast at 5. New analysis, new update from the Hurricane Center next. Wilmington, North Carolina getting hit hard with the eye wall this morning, and look at the debris blowing down the street. Piece of tin. We've got trees down across the area. Just got the updated power outage numbers for North Carolina. 595,000 customers. South Carolina 64,000 and change. That number is going to rise as the worst of the winds start to pick up there in and around the Myrtle Beach area. Back out live here, we're at the Intercoastal and Arley Road. The police back there are keeping everybody off Wrightsville Beach, which obviously has been hit pretty hard, at least from the beach perspective. Seen some shingles blow off the building where we are, and get an idea. You throw this up in the air when you have these wind gusts 50 to 60 miles an hour, just this little limb becomes a big projectile and blows in that direction. So the best bet today is to sit tight, stay inside, and avoid certainly any roadways if you have to go out that have lots of trees. Winds are coming in now due east off the Atlantic, across Wrightsville Beach, across the Intercoastal. Now the water, the surge has backed off because the high tide was about 2 hours ago. But we're not done with this. This onshore flow continues. Another high tide tonight, a few minutes after midnight, and then one tomorrow at noon we're concerned with. Successive high tides. It'll be really interesting to see what these beaches look like after we're done with this hurricane. It's going to be a couple days. Just getting into the first quarter. Mike Bettis down at Myrtle Beach. Mike, you're getting whacked pretty good. What's the latest there?
Yeah, this is it's about as bad as it gets.
Also, a place having a long way to go with the wind and the rain is Wrightsville and Wilmington as well. Let's check in with my colleague, meteorologist Mike Seidel, who's riding out this storm in Wilmington. And Mike, I looked at you yesterday, barely a breath of wind, no ripples on the harbor there. Different story this afternoon.
What makes a big difference is the wind direction. Yesterday, they were northwest coming from there. After the storm went by, the eye went right over Wrightsville Beach, just over the bridge behind me. The winds went to the northeast and east, and that really drove the water up. The storm surge overtook Wrightsville and right here in Wilmington. Let me show you what it looked like just 2 hours ago. It's high tide right now across the Intracoastal and Wrightsville Beach. We're on Arley Road. An hour ago, there was no water in the road. The difference today, the wind is from the northeast and not the northwest, so that's pushing the water onto the beaches over there. No telling how much sand and how much erosion has occurred so far at Wrightsville Beach. But here on the Wilmington side of the Intracoastal, we've got surge covering the entire area around these restaurants. Homes back here have enough elevation, they're fine, but the wind is still howling, gusting 60 to 70 miles an hour. And this is not the only high tide we're concerned with. The one tonight around midnight and even the one around lunchtime on Saturday could cause more problems because of the slow motion of Hurricane Florence. And the wind is still howling here right off the bridge over to Wrightsville Beach. Look at the wind whipping the palm trees. And this is going to knock more trees down on power lines. Last check, almost 600,000 customers here in North Carolina without power, and flash flood warnings covering the state, literally from Morehead City, Cape Lookout, all the way back towards 95 to Fayetteville, and then into parts of South Carolina. Some of the rainfall totals, Erica mentioned earlier, 18 inches on Wrightsville Beach. In this area, we've had upwards of 8, 10, 12 inches of rain. It's still raining at a pretty good clip, but this is not the torrential 1-2 inch hour rainfall rates we had last night and this morning, certainly with the eye wall. Right now, Wilmington Airport inland has had about 5 inches of rain, and I'm sure you've heard the second highest gust on record there, 105 miles an hour. Because of the power being out in this situation, they've got a curfew beginning at 10 p.m. tonight till 6 a.m. tomorrow, and I suspect that will also run Saturday night into Sunday morning. It is going to take a while for this wind to back off because the hurricane, even though it's now down to just 75 at a minimal, it's got a huge circulation, and part of it's still over water, but the big reason is it's just barely moving. So I suspect we'll have gusts over tropical storm force, which is 39 miles an hour. We'll have gusts in the 40s to near 50 well into tomorrow, and we'll probably still have some feeder bands with gusts. That's where the gusts will be, in some of those feeder bands coming off of the Atlantic Ocean. We've got live coverage up and down the coast. We'll head back to Myrtle Beach with Mike Bettis coming up in just a few minutes, but let's go back to Erica Navarro. And Dr. Navarro, it won't stop. You know, most hurricanes move a lot faster than this, and it's barely moving right now. And so the wind field, even though the hurricane's central core and the wind field has weakened, we still have plenty of circulation that's widespread. And if you think about it, Dr. Navarro, we really aren't that far from the center because the hurricane isn't moving that fast.
No, you're right, Mike. I mean, most hurricanes that come in along the coastline, they...
Continuing coverage of Florence. Rolls on in a moment. Wow. Where does that come from?
Jim Cantori taking the eye wall this morning over in Wilmington on the Cape Fear River. We are about 7 or 8 miles southeast of him. We're right at the foot of the Intracoastal Bridge over to Wrightsville Beach. You can see the police contingent behind me. They've had that blocked off since Wednesday morning, and I'm sure they'll be there at least through tomorrow, if not into Sunday. There's a curfew tonight, kicks in at 10 through 6 a.m. here in Wilmington. Power outages, 606,000 customers in South Carolina. And I'm sorry, in North Carolina. South Carolina, it's now up to 80,000 customers. That number is going to rise as the winds really ramp up as the storm drifts into that state. Right now, our gusts here are still running over 50 miles an hour. You can see how they're whipping all the trees and the palm trees in the distance, and this is what's causing the power outages. Now, the winds are not going to be as strong as they were this morning with the eye wall. 105 miles an hour, second highest gust on record here in Wilmington. Rainfall still adding up, 5 to 10 inches around the area. Over in Wrightsville Beach, 18 inches. Next high tide is at 12:03, a little after midnight tonight. We're going to have surge issues again. Arley Road was underwater here at these restaurants. If you're familiar with this area, the Fisherman's Wife, the Bridge Tender, the Fish House Grill, all those had water coming around the buildings and into Arley Road. Much like I saw with Floyd, although this time the water was even a little bit higher, although Floyd was a bit stronger when he came in down at Cape Fear. Different direction, different setup, certainly a different storm. Now, as far as what's ahead for the winds, they're going to continue gusty and strong right through tonight into tomorrow, because simply, even if Florence is downgraded to a depression, a strong depression, because right now it's in a minimal tropical storm. We still have a huge wind field that's got to wind down. And the real issue is it's not moving away. I mean, we're not that far from the center, 20, 25 miles. And so that's why the winds, unlike in a typical hurricane, come in. The hurricane comes in and goes by. The winds relax themselves, say 6, 7, 8 hours later. You notice a big difference. We don't have that difference because of the motion of the storm. And that's going to keep power crews off the bucket trucks for a while until at least, if not late tomorrow, till Sunday. So that's going to keep the power off for many of you in this area. It is warm. At least it's not January, if that makes you feel any better. Down the coast to Charleston, South Carolina, and Tevin Wooten watching the European, continuing with a morning run to take this hurricane or whatever it is, a depression, down the coast tonight and tomorrow.
I don't have communication anymore, so Mike,
Okay, picking it up here in Wilmington, North Carolina, right at the Intracoastal, and we're in one of these bands. This is about as nasty as it's been. We had some bands like this last night, and then the eye wall this morning, we were not on TV. It was the dark and raucous night at the hotel, and this wind gusting again over 60 miles an hour. Things blowing by, pieces of limbs. This is what we're seeing a lot of. Shingles coming off. You see what happens when you throw it off. It just takes off like a projectile. And unfortunately, a tree has fallen on a home here in Wilmington, killing a mom and her infant. The father was transported to the hospital with injuries. So here in Wilmington, New Hanover County, this has become a deadly hurricane now with 2 fatalities, a mom and her infant. Boy, I tell you, look at the wind just whipping the palm trees as we pan up the road. Look at the power lines being jostled by these winds. What is amazing is we are now about 8 hours past landfall, and we're still getting this kind of wind, and that is because the storm is barely moving. It's midway between Myrtle Beach and Wilmington right now. It's barely moving, 4 or 5 miles an hour. If that, it doesn't even look like it's moving that fast on radar. And another thing, this is a 75-mile-an-hour minimal hurricane, and we're getting gusts pushing that still. So, it goes without saying that categories sometimes are misleading with hurricanes. Or the wind just whipping through here, more heavy rainfall. Well, that woo. Now that is a pretty healthy gust right there when you have to lower your center of gravity. Just coming right off the Intracoastal. It seems like the winds veered a little bit more around to the southeast, or at least east-southeast. We had northeast winds earlier at high tide and brought the surge in. We showed you that on the Weather Channel. We'll have another high tide coming up around midnight, and that's going to push the water again on the Wilmington side of the Intracoastal around these restaurants. I don't think any water got into the restaurants, but it did go around them and into the street here, Arley Road, here right off the bridge. Behind me, you can see the police presence. They've been out there since Wednesday morning, since the mandatory evacuation kicked in, manning the bridge and not letting anybody go over for good reason. The mayor yesterday told us there was about 5 or 6 residents left and a year-round population of about 2,500 that decided to ride it out. There's some media over there too. But boy, this is pretty wicked. By the way, power outages, last check, 609,000 in North Carolina. In South Carolina, power outages now running at about 80,000 customers. That number keeps climbing. Some more leaves and twigs blowing by here off the Intracoastal. Most of the boats on this side, a lot of the boats were taken out of the water back on Monday and Tuesday. So they were well prepared. Across the way, we had some big boats we showed you last night. They've been bobbing up and down throughout the storm. Didn't see any earlier that had been loosened from its moorings, but boy, what a heck of a band coming in right now here in New Hanover County. By the way, flash flood warnings covering the entire area. The latest one going till 6:15, and north of here we have that tornado watch. Paul Goodlow, it's just amazing how long it's been since landfall, but with a storm that's not moving, it's hard to believe we're still getting this band right now coming on shore is really nasty. What What about your situation down there? I know
Yeah, Mike.
yesterday you took a real beating and battering, and the wind direction there has shifted too for you.
Right, it shifted 180 degrees, Mike.
This is meteorologist Mike Seidel. Still, we are getting battered here. We're in Wilmington, North Carolina, on the northeast side. We're right at the foot of the bridge that goes over the Intracoastal to Wrightsville Beach. Evacuated on Wednesday, mandatory evacuation. The surge came up at lunchtime into the street here around these restaurants. Don't think any water got into the restaurants. It's backed off now with the tide going out, but we've got another high tide coming in a little after midnight tonight. Expect more water coming in on this side of the Intracoastal, the Wilmington side. The wind has knocked down a lot of trees, knocked out power to over 600,000 customers in North Carolina, and has turned deadly here in Wilmington. A tree fell in a home earlier today, killing a mother and her infant. The father is at the hospital. He was transported by ambulance. And it just goes to show you, this is not the kind of weather you want to be driving around in. You just don't know when a tree is going to blow down. I can tell you, we didn't even have wind gusts like this last night. Now, we were when we went off the air, we were 6 hours from the landfall in this right here at Wrightsville Beach across the Intracoastal. But right now, we're getting some of these bands on the east side, and they're pretty raucous. Goodlow's getting one up around Beaufort, Morehead City, and then you look at the radar and you can see the inner bands coming in. You know, we're not that far, what, about 35, 40 miles from where the center of Hurricane Florence is, because it's just not moving. By the way, coming up at 5, just before 5, we'll have another complete update from the National Hurricane Center and an updated forecast track. Still a question on how far south it goes down the coastal areas of South Carolina, and that would have an impact on Myrtle Beach, although they are getting impacted, where it goes in relation to Myrtle Beach, and also certainly Charleston. And the rainfall total is also impacted too, but we will have a lot of rainfall, and there's going to be a lot of flooding in the interior sections, parts of North Carolina and South Carolina, and we've got crews staged right now. Let's go back to the Weather Channel. We've had water rescues, a lot of those up in the New Bern area, where that wind just blew the water right up the Neuse River into downtown New Bern. We were watching that, literally watching it come up yesterday. People were trapped and being rescued. Let's go back to Atlanta and check in with Leanna Brackett, who's got the word from the Coast Guard. Leanna?
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike. And yeah.
They're pretty bad as well. I know that the storm is exiting North Carolina, but meteorologist Mike Seidel has been in the Wrightsville Beach area, in the Wilmington area. Mike, just like with Paul Goodlow, the backside of this storm still means business.
Mike, it's almost impossible to hear you out here. It is really loud between the wind and the rain. As you can see, we're still getting hit very, very hard with wind gusts over 50 to 60 miles an hour, and the rain has come back. We're talking feet of rain already in some parts, over 20 inches in some parts of eastern North Carolina. I want to show you some of the damage around the area. Now, we've got trees down, even on homes, one that killed a mom and her infant earlier. Also, we've got debris on roadways around the city of Wilmington. And you get a sense, with the winds that are battering me, the winds this morning were even stronger. We peaked at 105 miles an hour. A lot of shingles being blown off roofs here. No significant structural damage, but boy, it's unrelenting, and more trees are going to come down because eventually, with this ground so saturated, the trees can get uprooted a little bit more. Yes, somebody's out driving around, honking their horn. Meanwhile, earlier, around lunchtime, we were down here on Arley Road, and the surge came in at high tide. I mean, it came in fast, and we hit across the street to higher ground. Take a look. It's high tide right now across the Intracoastal on Wrightsville Beach. We're on Arley Road. An hour ago, there was no water in the road. The difference today, the wind is from the northeast and not the northwest, so that's pushing the water onto the beaches over there. No telling how much sand and how much erosion has occurred so far at Wrightsville Beach. But here on the Wilmington side of the Intracoastal, we've got surge covering the entire area around these restaurants. Homes back here have enough elevation, they're fine, but the wind is still howling, gusting 60 to 70 miles an hour. And this is not the only high tide we're concerned with. The one tonight around midnight and even the one around lunchtime on Saturday could cause more problems because of the slow motion of Hurricane Florence. Okay, we're back here live, and as you can see, not much has changed. Now, the water did go out about an hour or so after high tide, but we have another high tide coming up tonight. Record inundation, a record surge with this storm, this hurricane in Wilmington, at 3.53, I believe it was 3.53 feet. So that's the highest on record. Out on the beaches, the surge was higher.
Wilmington, that's where our Mike Seidel is live tonight, so let's get you back out to North Carolina and in Wilmington with Mike. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Dr. Navarro, we have moved a couple miles away from the Intracoastal back towards our hotel. The power is out across the entire area. Over 600,000 customers in North Carolina alone, primarily near the coast. We've got heavy rain continuing, and look at this. A lot of uprooted trees across the area. Now, this is a very small, it's like a small tree through this office park and area around Wilmington. But when you drive around the residential neighborhoods, you do see larger trees down, and again, trees taking down power lines. And although it's a tropical storm, remember, we're still getting gusts 60 to 70 miles an hour. And remember, also, because of the slow movement, it's a very wet system. Sometimes we get our largest rainfall totals from slow-moving tropical storms or even tropical depressions. So don't let the fact that the Hurricane Center has dropped it from a hurricane status to a tropical storm status, let your guard down that the rainfall totals are going to be any different. They're not. We're still looking at tremendous amounts of rainfall on top of already what we've had. Right now, we're getting some very heavy rain with these bands still wrapping in, not only here, but up the coast towards the Outer Banks and down into Myrtle Beach. And this is going to be a continued threat, at least through tomorrow here in the Wilmington area. And still getting battered. Paul Goodlow with one of those outer bands raking the area up the coast by about 80 or 90 miles, the Beaufort, Moorhead City area. Paul, what can you tell us about your adventure today versus yesterday as far as the wind goes and as far as the impact there on the coast?
The intensity hasn't really changed a whole lot, Mike.